Webtoon has thrown down the gauntlet and asked for your best short story. Let's talk about what they really want so you can make your best short story submission. Hey, Walter here, doing what I can to make comics easier by demystifying the process because it shouldn't be daunting or overwhelming to tell your story. So another epic Webtoon contest has exploded on the scene. You can win $15,000, a spot in an anthology, and get a short animation of your story made. That is really freaking cool. But what do we need to do to win? Well, we need to submit a story that's either going to melt their hearts or blow their minds. I think the two categories are pretty self-explanatory. Mind-blowing is going to involve some kind of twist or a thought-provoking story or concept. Melting the heart is going to be romance or some story about sacrifice. If you check out their homepage for the short story contest, you can see some examples. And there's also a place to browse the current submissions so you can get an idea of what other people are doing and what Webtoon is looking for. What I think is going to trip up a lot of creators is the short story aspect of it. I think there's this tendency to tell these huge epic sagas, with tons of world building, 4,000 pages, 8 million characters, whatever it is. But we have to tell a short story. That means we have to boil our stories down to their very core. You need to figure out what you're trying to say, and you need to say it hella fast. So the requirements for this from Webtoon are 3 to 5 episodes of at least 30 panels. If you think about that in a traditional format, that's maybe 15 to 25 pages. That is not a lot of space to tell a thought-provoking or heart-melting, self-contained story. So we really need to think about what we're trying to say, and we need to tell it really fast. A side note is it says at least 30 panels. I wouldn't try to be sneaky and put 200 panels in a single episode. I think that's going to turn them off and they're not going to want to read it. So I would try to keep it as close as possible to the 30 panels that they want. Since we have a short amount of space to tell our story, it's going to take a lot of planning to get a good pace for our storytelling. And what I mean by that is we don't want to spend 3 episodes setting up the problem and then end the entire story in just a handful of panels. Now, a good basic skeleton for telling a story is the 3-act play. And I want to say this is very basic, bare bones. I don't want you to feel trapped by the 3-act play. It's just a good place to start if you're feeling stuck. And it boils down to basically setting up a problem, working on the problem, and then finally solving the problem. So we could simply arrange it to where episode 1, 2, and 3 were acts 1, 2, and 3. So we say episode 1 introduces the problem. Let's make up a fake story. Let's say Sarah needs to pay her rent, but she's fired. Episode 1 would be introducing Sarah, her life, her situation, and then she's fired right at the end of episode 1. Oh snap, what happens next? It's a cliffhanger. The reader wants to know. They have to move on to episode 2. Episode 2 would be Sarah's journey in trying to get more money, find a new job, dealing with whatever, and ending on a moment where everything that's happened comes together, and now it's that moment when Sarah's action will change her life forever. Maybe she robbed a bank because she was so desperate, but during the robbery somebody was hurt. Now Sarah has to decide to either run or go back and save that person's life. Episode 2 ends right there. Holy crap, another cliffhanger. Now, episode 3 starts with her choice. What does she do? Well, let's say she goes back and saves a person. She ends up being arrested and put in jail. See, it all comes back to the start. She needed to pay her rent, but now she's living rent-free. Now, maybe you also have a side story where she always wanted to be a lawyer, and now she has the free time to study law in prison. Double whammy. And that's the 3-act play in 3 episodes. Now maybe you might need a little bit more room. Usually with the 3-act play, the middle episode 2, act 2 is usually the longer episode, so you can stick stuff in there. And it doesn't have to be hard cuts, like maybe act 1 bleeds into act 2, bleeds into act 3. It doesn't have to be hard and fast. Play around, do what feels right, and like I said, don't feel stuck to that 3-act skeleton. The final thing I want to go over is the judgment criteria. This is what Webtoon is going to use to determine your worth. Not really. Never tie your self-worth to your successes or the perceived successes of others. You're amazing just because you're you, and it has nothing to do with this contest or anything to do with success. Now, I think these judgment criteria are actually really interesting even if we don't enter the contest. This is what Webtoon thinks is important for a webcomic to have and how important each one is for the success of that comic in general. All right, so first you got 40% for the concept, then 30% for storytelling and engagement. So what does that actually mean? The narrative category specific criteria is basically how well you delivered the brief. How well did you blow the mind? How well did you melt the heart? They have it as the most important thing, having the story deliver what the story promised. Not drawing the best hands or the best hair, delivering the best story. Next is pacing, readability, and clarity. Again, how well does your art tell the story? It's not how good your anatomy or your perspective or your foreshortening is. I think this says a lot to those of us who want to make comics but don't feel like we have the art skills. I say whatevs, tell your story with freaking stick figures if you need to, but just tell your story. Finally, we have level of engagement. I think a lot of creators are discouraged by this because they don't have a million readers. And I feel that, but notice how Webtoon defines engagement. Audience engagement is measured by a combination of number of views, likes, and comments. While popularity is a factor, the level of engagement is a weighted measurement and ratio for a normalized review. You also will be taking into consideration content of comments and will not tolerate harassment and abuse. So the popularity will affect your amount of views, likes, and comments, but I think Webtoon will also be looking at the quality of those comments as well. Imagine a comic with 1 million views and just 100 comments versus a comic with 20 views but 50 comments. At face value, the second comic isn't as popular, but look at that engagement percentage. I think that's going to say a lot to Webtoon when they're looking at audience engagement. Remember, engagement isn't just a one-way street. You need to engage with those that are engaging with you to really create a sense of community. And remember, it is better to give than receive, so why not go out there and engage with some other creators? And if somebody comments on your episode with cool, don't just respond back with thanks. Engage with them. Ask them what other comics they're reading. Tell them about the episode, like maybe something you struggled with or a piece of dialogue that you really enjoyed. Sometimes people want to engage, but they don't know how, so you need to engage with them. Create that sense of community with your readers. The final thing I want to talk about is schedule, because there is definitely a deadline for this contest. So when I'm trying to figure out my schedule, I go to timeanddate.com to figure out exactly how much time I have left. And then I go to printacalendar.com to print out some simple calendars that I can write my schedule on in pencil, because life does happen. And I just keep it simple. If I have 12 weeks until my deadline and I have 60 pages to draw, I need to do 5 pages a week. So I'll just jot that down on my calendars. Pages 1 to 5 on week 1, pages 6 to 10 on week 2, etc., etc. You get the idea. It's probably important to mention that you should check out their rules and FAQs, read them very closely, pick out all the details for all the technical requirements. You don't want to miss out on something simple that you could have easily fixed. Like, you need to be 13 years old to enter the contest. And I want to add this one little bit in there too. It's like, if you've been wanting to make a comic in forever, but you're having a hard time starting, or you can't work up the courage to start, this contest is a really amazing excuse to actually make your first comic. And also remember, if this is your first comic or one of your very first comics, don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to make an amazing comic. Make the best comic you can make right now with what you have. And like, maybe you don't have all the best technical skills, but you got heart for your story. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have written your story in the first place. So give yourself and your story a chance. And I'm serious, like, if you can only draw stick figures, draw stick figures telling your stories. Like a stick figure on a page, speaking your words, telling your story. That's like better than nothing any day. So who's working on a submission? How is it going? How far along are you? Are you stuck? Have you started posting yet? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to keep making comics easier, make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch another video for more sweet, sweet goodness. Peace!